Yellowish stains and charred patches were found on the ladder to the windowless spire, but when a reporter climbed up, opened the horizontally sliding trapdoor, and shot a feeble flashlight beam into the black and strangely foetid space, he saw nothing but darkness and an heterogeneous litter of shapeless fragments near the aperture. The verdict, of course, was charlatanry. Someone had played a joke on the superstitious hill dwellers, or else some fanatic had striven to bolster up their fears for their own supposed good, or perhaps some stranger and more sophisticated dwellers had staged an elaborate hoax. On the outside world, there was an amusing aftermath when the police sent an officer to verify the reports. 3 men in succession found ways of evading the assignment, and the 4th went very reluctantly and returned very soon without adding to the account given by the reporters. From this point onwards, Blake's diary shows a mounting tide of insidious horror and nervous apprehension. He upbraids himself for not doing something and speculates wildly on the consequences of another electrical breakdown. It has been verified that on 3 occasions during thunderstorms, he telephoned the electric light company in a frantic vein and asked that desperate precautions against a lapse of power be taken. Now and then his entries shew concern over the failure of the reports to find the metal box and stone, and strangely marred skeleton. When they explored the shadowy tower room, he assumed that these things had been removed. Whether, by whom, or what, he could only guess, but his worst fears concerned him, and the kind of unholy rapport he felt to exist between his mind and that lurking horror in the distant steeple, that monstrous thing of night, which his rashness had called out of the ultimate black spaces. He seemed to feel a constant tugging at his will, and callers of that period remember how he would sit abstractedly at his desk and stare out of the west window at that far-off, spire-bristling mound beyond the swirling smoke of the city. His entries dwell monotonously on certain terrible dreams, and of a strengthening of the unholy report in his sleep. There is mention of a night when he awaked to find himself fully dressed outdoors and headed automatically down College Hill toward the west. Again and again he dwells on the fact that this thing in the steeple knows where to find him. The week following July 30th is recalled as the time of Blake's partial breakdown. He did not dress and ordered all his food by telephone. Visitors remarked the cords he kept near his bed, and he said that sleepwalking had forced him to bind his ankles every night with knots, which would probably hold, or else waken him with the labor of untying. In his diary, he told of the hideous experience which had brought the collapse. After retiring on the night of the 30th, he had suddenly found himself groping about in an almost black space. All he could see were short, faint, horizontal streaks of bluish light, but he could smell an overpowering foetor and hear a curious jumble of soft, furtive sounds above him. When he moved, he stumbled over something, and at each noise there would come a sort of answering sound from above. A vague stirring mixed with the cautious sliding of wood on wood. Now, certain repulsive and scary forms are a favorite for a lot of the shayateen min al-jinn. Once his groping hands encountered a pile of stone with a vacant top. Whilst latter, he found himself clutching the rungs of a ladder built into the wall and fumbling his uncertain way upward towards some region of intenser stench, where a hot searing blast down against him. Before his eyes, a kaleidoscopic range of phantasmal images played, all of them dissolving at intervals into the picture of a vast, unplumbed abyss of night, wherein the world suns and worlds of an even profounder blackness. He thought of the ancient legends of ultimate chaos, at whose central sprawls the blind idiot god, as a thought, lord of all things, encircled by his flopping horde of mindless and amorphous dancers, and lulled by the thin monotonous piping of a demoniac flute, held in nameless pause. Then a sharp report from the outer world broke through his stupor and roused him to an unutterable horror of his position. What it was, he never knew. Perhaps it was some belated peal from the fireworks heard all summer on Federal Hill, as the dwellers hail their various patron saints, are the saints of their native villages in Italy. In any event, he shrieked aloud, dropped frantically from the ladder, and stumbled blindly across the obstructed floor of the almost lightless chamber that encompassed him. He knew instantly where he was, and plunged recklessly down the narrow spiral staircase, tripping and bruising himself at every turn. There was a nightmare flight through a vast cobwebbed nave, whose ghostly arches reached up to realms of leering shadow, a sightless scramble through a littered basement, a climb to regions of air and streetlights outside, and a mad racing down a spectral hill of gibbering gables across a grim, silent city of tall, black towers, and up the steep, eastward precipice to his own ancient door. On regaining consciousness in the morning, he found himself lying on his study floor, fully dressed. Dirt and cobwebs covered him, and every inch of his body seemed sore and bruised. When he faced the mirror, he saw that his hair was badly scorched, while a trace of the strange evil odor seemed to cling to his outer clothing. It was then that his nerves broke down. Thereafter, longingly, exhaustedly about in a dressing gown, he did little but stare from his west window, shiver at the threat of thunder, make wild entries in his diary. The great storm broke just before midnight on August 8th. Lightning struck repeatedly in all parts of the city, and 2 remarkable fireballs were reported. The rain was torrential, while a constant fusillade of thunder brought sleepiness to thousands. Blake was utterly frantic in his fear for the lightning system, and tried to telephone the company around 1 a.m., though by that time service had been temporarily cut off in the interest of safety. He recorded everything in his diary. The large, nervous, and often undecipherable hieroglyphs telling their own story of growing frenzy and despair, and of entries scrawled blindly in the dark.